I am Jim Collison and live from Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Theme Thursday, Season 2, recorded on April 21st, 2016. Theme Thursday is a Gallup webcast series that dives deep into the CliftonStrengths Finder themes, one theme at a time, and today's theme is deliberative. If you have questions, comments, or contributions during the webcast, we do have a live chat room available for you right below the main video window, and we'd love to have you log in. You can monitor it. It's more fun when you log in and you give us your opinion. In their bottom left-hand corner on the chat window, it says log in. Click on that, choose the guest option, put your name in there. Take out it'll say guest 1, 2, 3, 4, something like that. Take that out, put your name in so we know who you are, and then click log in. No need to create an account with Chatwing. That'll just allow you in our guest spot, and of course you can always put in your questions during the program. If you're listening to the recorded version or need custom strengths coaching solutions for small, medium, or large organizations, contact us. Send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. Don't forget to visit the Gallup Strength Center, just gallupstrengthcenter.com for all one word, gallupstrengthcenter.com for all your coaching resources and StrengthsFinder training needs. You can also catch the video on both streaming and now downloadable audio for all of our webcasts, and we have many of them available for you. Lots of professional development and learning. The best place to get the links for all of that is at our coaches blog. I should say award-winning coaches blog, Mike. I think I'm going to say that from here on out. Award-winning. We haven't really won an award, but I'm going to say we have at coaching.gallup. I think it's award-winning.com.
I'm going to make us an award.
We should. At 250,000 views every single year. That's a good
worth an award.
Yeah. So, Micah Libra is our host today. She's one of my favorite learning and development consultants here at Gallup, and it's always great. I always look forward to Thursdays with you, Micah. It was tough to be off. We took a week off 2 weeks ago. It's always tough to be off, but welcome back to another Theme Thursday.
Thanks, Jim. I really missed you last week when we were not here. That was difficult.
It was weird not to put together a Theme Thursday.
It was very strange. And you know what? I was on site with a client doing what I used to do every single day. And so I was in sort of my previous world, and it still didn't feel right.
Yeah, I had one of our listeners say, are you sure you're not doing it today? You know, and getting in a daily or in a weekly rhythm, it's one of those things. I did plan like 5 weeks off to just give us a break in case things came up, or we had to cancel one. So far, we've been really consistent with these, but so there are weeks. If you're interested in knowing what the schedule is, a lot of folks have asked me, and including the companion guide for this program. If you haven't downloaded that, especially if you're listening to the recorded version, just stop it, pause it, head over to coaching.gallup.com and look for the GWSW, that stands for Gallup, Weekly Gallup Strengths Wisdom, and you can click on that, the whole schedule, and they're hyperlinked. If you click on it, it'll take you to a sign-up form. Sign up for it, and we'll email you that form, and you can go back. We don't have them all. Another question I get, Micah, all the time is, when are you going to release them all? They'll all be released by the end of the year. When we get through Season 2, they will all be out and available for you. Right now, I think we have 20 of them available for you, so head out there and download it, and we'd love to have you going. Speaking of companion guide, Mike, as we talk about deliberative today, why don't you walk us through, for those that have downloaded us, walk us through. Let's talk about deliberative.
So deliberative, at first glance at deliberative, it is care. I think that that's the word that comes to mind most for me when I think about real great people I've known who have deliberative, is care. It is an executing theme, but it is executing cautiously and executing with care. Really what they are looking for are potential risk, potential downfalls, and they think about how to execute, how to get to that end product in the most cautious and most accurate way. Let's dive into our companion guide. The first thing you're going to see on every single companion guide is our short theme definition. That is the same definition that is on your theme sequence report, and when you download that from strengthcenter.com. It says this: people exceptionally talented in the deliberative theme are best described by the serious care that they take in making decisions or choices. They anticipate obstacles. I think that when you think about deliberative, if you read the extended definition of it, you really help see that people with deliberative are bold and brave enough to search for what could danger be, whereas those of us without deliberative, it's number 34 for me, are a lot maybe quicker to just avoid what could those obstacles be, or avoid what could the danger, what could the risk be. People with high deliberative are able to say, no, we can execute best, we can get to what we need to do in the very best way possible if we're not afraid of those risks, if we're not afraid of going to what could go wrong, and really engaging with what could go wrong in order to move forward in the very best way.
Micah, we haven't talked about these in the past, but this theme in particular has an incredible, I think, a power and edge to it, which we have listed there. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, on every companion guide, we've got the themes power and edge. That isn't to be seen as two opposite things. I've taught this in person, and people say, "Well, is the power the good thing and the edge is the bad?" No, no, no. It's just power and edge is a powerful. How does the definition of this theme live out in a beneficial way? So you can think about that little description of power and edge as being a quick way to speed you ahead from the name it then to the claim it. How do you see the value or the power and edge? What we say here is people with strong deliberative talents bring a thorough and conscientious approach to their endeavors. They have the ability to reduce risk and to prevent problems through anticipation and careful thought. And they make outstanding decisions. I love that word, outstanding decisions. I think about people with high deliberative as excellent assessors, very careful. I think it's about being committed to the very best decision rather than having a whole bunch of what ifs. And I like to think about, people with high deliberative can say typically without much doubt what the best option is going to be, not just provide you a whole bunch of possible options.
Yeah, I love that word careful, and I love that word thoughtful when we think of this. And, we admitted it's 33 for me, 34 for you. I need deliberative in my role sometimes. I need folks who slow me down. It frustrates me sometimes when I come up against that. But managing over the last decade, I've really realized how important that is to lean on that on folks who can do that, who have that gift and can do it well. And so when we think about those kinds of people, and we think about it in its raw and mature state, can we walk a little bit through what does that look like raw? What does it look like when it's mature?
Yeah, when we talk about raw versus mature, it is helping illustrate the developmental journey here. So it doesn't mean good or bad. It just means that the themes that we have are really neutral. There's no back end sort of quality assurance that says, by the way, you're already awesome at this. It really is just a set of talents, a set of how you think, feel, and behave. So that might be in its raw state, meaning there's still a lot of development that could happen. And a theme might be raw simply because it's not something we've thought about. It also might be raw because it's perhaps maybe we're just not experienced with it. Maybe we're just young and we've been playing out more as the possibility than the ability. When we talk about talent, we talk about potential. So raw is still there's potential versus mature, which is back to that idea of really investing in, being aware of, and using your talents as something that leads to productive application. So with that little interlude, raw deliberative looks like anxiety. So I think raw deliberative, you could be anxious, whereas mature deliberative, the flip side of that is you can be protective. I was at a 5-year-old's birthday party last weekend, and there was what I thought, this didn't come from a deliberative side, it came from an ideation side. I saw a trampoline, 2 bouncy castles, and a piñata, and I immediately thought, this is an insurance person's worst nightmare. Like, there were a lot of potential dangers, and to me it was just, hey, this is a funny thing that I observed. But I was standing next to a good friend of mine who has deliberative, and she also has 2 young kids. And she said, I wish that my kids would just go out there and play as freely without abandon as all the other kids here. But both of them tend to have my habit of wanting to kind of hold back until they're positive that the situation is safe. And she described that as, sometimes people, and this was completely not an overt strengths conversation, but I knew it was deliberative week, so I was listening listening for this. And she said, some people think that I'm cold or that I'm sort of standoffish, but the truth is I'm the youngest of my family, and I watched my older siblings make mistakes, and I never wanted to make those same mistakes, but I also was aware of how mistakes can take us off track from where we're going. So before I jump in, I want to make sure that I go through the entire process and look for any potential future mistakes so that once I take action in the best direction. She also was pretty terrified of the trampolines and the bouncy castles, but
well, and it's funny because that's a great example sometimes of that what separates those two, right? And you see the kids that get there and they just bolt, right?
Right.
Just bolt straight for them, no abandon. That's me, right? Just bolt for it. Hey, let's do this. This is fun. Let's get involved. And then interesting observation, she's already doing some strength spotting in the kids to say, they're a little bit like me. They're going to come at this from a little more cautious standpoint. I like when you think about the raw versus mature, and in the next one we're thinking, I think it's really, really important, the separator on this with deliberative is what makes it powerful. So let's talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. So I think raw deliberative is fueled by scare, fueled by fear, whereas mature deliberative is fueled by care. So you can, because you've got, it's similar, I think, to restorative in that you've got this pulse on what could go wrong. Restorative looks for what is about to break, and deliberative looks for probably what is a potential risk. And there's a slight nuance and a difference between those two, but both of them could lead you to a lot of fear. Because you are tuned in to potential dangers more than other people are. But that fear can lead to, I care very much. So if you can be driven by not just a fear of things, but the proactive and the positive side of that is, what do you care about? What are you protecting? Raw deliberative, you could be paralyzed by potential pitfalls. Mature deliberative is about selective caution. So not thinking about all the risk around you in every single direction, but being able to say, what, there's some risk that I'm either not in control of or that I can accept as part of life. I think the mature deliberative can say there are certain items I'm in charge of, certain deliverables, certain projects, maybe even certain aspects of my life that I really do need to take a lot of selectiveness, a lot of caution around, and that's where I'm going to focus my deliberation.
Micah, does it always have to be, I think sometimes we think of careful, when we use words like careful and care, protective, those become defensive. Can we think, and not defensive in a bad way, I just mean a posture of defense, right? How do we think of, or can we think of, because Abby had said in the chat room, I find this theme to be very influential, even though it's an executing theme. Once a decision is made, I find people deliberative to be very influential in their decision for the best one. So is that a posture of offense? I mean, how can we think about deliberative as an offensive weapon as opposed to just defensive? Is that the way?
That's such a cool question. I think it comes off as defensive because it's not super common in our database. It doesn't show up a whole lot of the time. And if you compare that to the most common theme of achiever, which is an engine to drive us forward, deliberative is typically in the minority. So if we live in a world that's constantly talking about what are we pushing out the door, it means that deliberative, we don't hear it quite as often, and it might come across as defensive because you're constantly having to battle just the sheer number of achievers in the world. And I think that if it's positioned correctly, it's a fantastic offense. If you know what's coming and you can think about it ahead of time, somebody with deliberative can be it can come at a decision that's already been made with an element of truth and awareness that other people can never achieve, or can try really hard to achieve and find other themes to get there. But there's just that level of certainty that I think deliberative brings once they've come to that decision. So I've worked in boardrooms with people with high deliberative who absolutely know that this is the right way to proceed, and I can tell you why. And I think about mature deliberative being able to even quantify that and speak really intelligently and really influentially about here's the risks that we're avoiding when we take this route versus other routes. It can be a pretty loud, bold theme in that way.
Yeah, I think your last pair too also speaks to this. So talk a little bit about your last pair there.
Yeah, so I've got the raw, this might be a little bit about the influential piece. Raw deliberative is let's be careful. which I think is sort of that the scared mom on the playground. Don't jump too high. Let's just be careful all the time. Whereas mature deliberative is let's do the most careful thing. So being able to think about how do I help other people see the value in caution, the value in accuracy, and make it be more about the execution rather than just the putting bumper pads on everything. Let's think about what are we moving forward rather than what are we hiding from. And then I think raw deliberative, to sort of close this out here, raw deliberative is closed. I think a lot of times this could come from just being overwhelmed by the sheer number of things you need to decide. Deliberative does like to take time and care and caution in making those decisions. And if you've got too many things on your plate, too many things coming at you, or too many things that you feel you are the sole owner of, it can be easy just to say the answer is no, we can't proceed. To just get to that level of I'm too full with possible pitfalls, I can't even think about it. So closed would be the raw side, and I think compassionate is the mature side of that. So being able to say, I'm going to connect to the human beings and demonstrate my level of compassion for them by demonstrating what I'm helping them avoid.
In season 1, I think when we were talking about this, and I have so many conversations, and sometimes it's hard to remember exactly where they came from. But as we kind of tried to find the best of deliberative, I think there was some conversation where the worst. Sometimes people think deliberative is slow, right? Because it has to slow down to think. And so there was an example I think we used of a EMT, right? Someone who has to make decisions very, very quickly, and you would think, oh, deliberative would not. If I had deliberative, I may not be great at an emergency room situation. And I think the guest said something like this: I'm okay as long as I know the time that I have in order to make the decision. So if I've got 1 minute, at least I know at that point I can think about this and assess the risk for it. And so I think in one of those theme biases, right, when we think about the bias of this one, it gets a bad rap for being slow. Micah, how would you respond to that as we think about that example? Because it doesn't always have to be slow, right?
Well, a couple things. First, I don't think slow has to be bad. I don't think there's anything wrong with being slow.
Well, it's bad when you're an activator.
I think that the bad rap is that we equate deceleration with frustration. And I think sometimes exactly what we need is to slow something down. And not to get too personal, but the only sex talk I ever had when I was growing up was my dad telling me, just always know that there's nothing wrong with slowing down. And, it brings me back to that place where it's actually there's wisdom in slowing down. That being said, no, deliberative doesn't always have to be slow. Deliberative is how you execute. Let's remember, it's about getting things done. And so I love that example of if I have a minute, I'm going to use the whole minute. It is something, I bring us back to the word deliberate. That's a verb. It's something that you do. So it is about taking that, getting a high from getting to think through things. So up front, let people know, what do you do well? To follow your EMT example, I think about, there's probably quite a bit of deliberation that happened that led that person up to being an EMT. And so maybe it is the 1 minute on the spot that I think. Maybe it's also, the 10, 20 years that I've been practicing this. Yeah. And in all of that leading up to something, it builds upon it. I don't just drop it because I have deliberative. And so every piece of information that helps me get to getting the product out the door or get to action is something that I'm going to continue to think about, continue to learn from.
Yeah, and I think in the example we talked about, some of those decisions are pre-made decisions. So the deliberation took place in advance. Right. In other words, when these things are happen this way, I am going to respond this way every single time. Man, as a doctor, that's what I would want, right? I would want.
Would you?
Not somebody going, oh, we could do it this way. We could try it that way. This. You don't want ideation at that point. You want action, and I think that's the power of deliberative.
I think you just said something really powerful there. It is about action. Deliberative is about let's do the most careful thing. Let's do the most accurate thing. I think that there's quite a bit of truth also that motivates and fuels deliberative. It's people with high deliberative, similar almost to analytical, are really looking for the proof and the how do I engage with every possible scenario so that I can look for actually what is the truth of this. So don't just tell me everything's going to be okay. Let me think about what could go wrong so that I can prove that the direction we take is the direction where everything will be okay.
Yeah, no, I think well said. Let's think about some complementary themes when we think about deliberative.
Yeah, of course, any theme could complement another theme, but a couple came to mind for me, top of mind, when we're thinking about how could other people with other themes help your deliberative. The first is arranger. So if you're deliberative and you have a partner with arranger, they could help you find the best moving parts to consider. Similar to what I mentioned on raw and mature of being selectively cautious. I think somebody with arranger can say, you know what, other people are in charge of this piece of the activity, or here's the most important decision that we really need your deliberative to focus on. I think a ranger can sort of help focus through the strategy and really think, where do we need more depth of consideration before we move forward. The second one I have is communication. So I think it's pretty important. How do we use deliberative in executing theme? How do we use it to benefit other people in a more directly influencing sort of way? Communication could help you buy time for the caution that you need. It could also help you talk about the excellence that you're bringing. I think very often deliberative, once they've gone through that process of thinking about possible obstacles, anticipating any sort of danger, and then discovering the best way forward, it's about moving forward. It's not about falling in love with the plan that you came up with. So very often they may fail to explain to people why we're taking the direction that we're taking, because they're very excited about moving forward on that direction. So I think somebody with high communication could really help set the scene for the excellence perhaps that we've brought in the past, and the reason that we need to take some caution in the future. And almost on that same note, around how do you implement the best plan, I thought about self-assurance as being a really great partner for deliberative. So being able to say, I know that this has been thought out well by my deliberative friend here. This is certainly the way that we need to go. Self-assurance really is about understanding that my inner compass and my abilities can get us somewhere. I think that if you partner that with deliberative, it leads to a really great, deep, trusting relationship. People with deliberative, they select their friends and their trusted advisors really carefully. So it would be great, I think, to see what those two would come up with in a partnership situation.
Michael, before we talk about likely and unlikely pairs, there's been some conversation in the chat room about this theme in young individuals, and how would we help as a parent or a coach if we see deliberative young? What kind of things might we do to encourage that? How would we lean on that, or how would we use that?
I love the question because I think it comes from love. Let's also remember that this theme can be raw at any age. So let's not just focus this in on, if it's young, don't assume that it's raw. But, in young people, it could look like, I think, a lot of enjoyment in making the decision, which could look like a lot of time spent thinking about your options. So in season 1, we talked about being in a toy aisle and with a young child and saying you need to pick out one toy, and it taking forever. I think about maybe it could be even in older young adults, you need to select a college, you need to select a university, you need to select now. Students very often are forced really early on to declare a major, to declare who they are, and I think that if that presents a challenge, it could be deliberative. It could be a lot of other themes as well. So the way to lean into it, the way to honor it, is to help them, just like you would with an adult, help them review when they've made really excellent decisions, and help them name, what was your process for that decision? Was it that you had to say, I need some time, I'll get back to you later? Or was it that you needed to talk it through with a trusted advisor? I think helping them identify what's their best thinking partners, and because it's an executing theme, you could even do that by asking for, what have you created, what have you taken action on that's really felt like it was the most accurate step to take?
Yeah, I think in season 1 that was my son that we were using as an example, because he would take forever. I mean, we'd go pick out a Hot Wheel, and it would just, a Hot Wheel, and their brothers would go snatch, and we'd be done, and we'd wait in the aisle for 45 minutes. I love the idea of kind of focusing in on the decision-making process. Like, what led you? I think these are some questions you can ask a child, young adult. What led you to this process? What was your thinking process as you worked through it? I think they'd love to kind of work through that and share that, and because oftentimes, I never asked this question. I wish I'd had that when my kids were younger. I didn't know what was going on in their head, and if I'd have taken a few minutes just to kind of say, What were you thinking? I mean, I'm really interested in what you were thinking that brought you to that point. I think that would be a very engaging question. Do you think?
You know what, I zoomed all the way back to third grade when you said this because I was in a competition where we had to come up with as many like creative ideas as we could in a minute, and then we had to put on a skit about it. And later, the judge asked our team, "How did you come up with that idea?" And I was dumbfounded because I thought it was the stupidest question anyone had ever asked. Because I was like, "Well, I just came up with it. Doesn't everyone just come up with ideas just all the time?" I have ideation, and it's one of those that I can remember having my whole life. But I would love to have asked that to someone with deliberative because I think they probably would have appreciated the question and would have been able to come back and review and really think through, this is how I came up with it. And I think if you fast forward that to let's say to a work situation or to an adult situation, how did you come up with this is something you want to help people with high deliberative explain in a condensed way. So it might not be something that they do very easily, but again, that idea of partnering with someone with communication to say, this is what I considered in order to get us here, to really get that cautiousness and that care and that consideration outside of your head and into the hearts and minds of your followers. I think what a great way to really polish that deliberative talent.
Yeah, that's given me some clues. I mean, that same son now is 25 and living on his own and making some big decisions. And I think, Mike, I'm going to try that when next time he's thinking about a decision. I'm going to say, hey, John, work me through. I'm really interested in how you got to where you're getting. I think in the past I've been quick to judge and just judge the end result without necessarily asking him for all the entire process to get through. So I think, man, that's given me a little bit of a clue with him. I think when I've done that in the past, not purposely, I just did it. I think we've had some really good conversations. So thanks for just like a little mini coaching session for me every single week.
Anything I can do for you, Jim. Deliberative is not a strategic thinking theme. There's a lot of thinking in the executing. So you might focus those questions on what have you done or what are you thinking about doing next. So really focusing on where are you in the deliberation process right now.
Good clarification from that standpoint. So we think about, and Abby had mentioned this earlier, she has responsibility and deliberative together. As we think about likely and unlikely pairs, let's match those up.
Cool. So, Abby, awesome. We want to hear from you because it is responsibility and deliberative is the most likely to happen together in people's top 5. So the way we do this is we have a random sample of 250,000 StrengthsFinder completes, and we look at what shows up the most often in your top 5 themes. Responsibility and deliberative go together the most likely, and I think about that as commitment to accuracy. So responsibility is a commitment to following through on what I've said I would do. When you add deliberative, I think it's following through in the very best way, moving through in a way that avoids any potential obstacles. So they're both executing themes. I think one of them, responsibility, probably looks a little bit more like an external promise. And so it looks, sometimes we talk about responsibility as it can masquerade as a relationship building theme because it shows loyalty very often. It's loyalty to the commitment. The motivation is about the doing, not necessarily the relationship that you build because of it. But it can look to others like, you care about me as a human because you did what I needed you to do. When you add deliberative to that, I think it just ups the level of care that you're demonstrating and really helps you think about just not just finishing something, but finishing it in the most accurate way.
Well, speaking of accurate, I must have misread the name. The Abby we're thinking of says it wasn't her, so that's okay.
That's all right.
It was a while ago I tried to find it. I'm just making stuff up. So that's what we roll. Speaking of this week, I was having a phone conversation with one of our listeners, and he had said, hey, so I have command and woo, which is an unlikely pair, and he'd been listening, right, to these likely and unlikely. So Adam, it pays off to listen to Theme Thursday as we talk about these. When we think about deliberative, there are some unlikely pairs as well. Let's talk about those.
Yeah, you know what? On that note, it doesn't mean that you're conflicted. If you've got an unlikely pair, it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It just means you're even more unique than you already are. And the great thing about CliftonStrengths is it's helping you really determine the fingerprint that you operate with rather than just what's your favorite room in the house. If you just think about the sheer number of possible patterns and possible pairings, it's a very personal and unique sort of set of themes. So anytime you see somebody with an unlikely pair, just ask them how it works. Chances are they can tell you better than you can. That being said, the least likely theme to show up with deliberative is woo. And woo, I think it makes sense maybe that they're least likely because woo has a great ability to just jump in and get on with it. But what they're getting on with is the connection to other people. If you had both of them together, I think it would look like a cautiousness that can be charming. I lived in the UK for 3 years, and there was something about the royals that was so attractive. And today, the day we're recording this, is Queen Elizabeth's 90th birthday. There's something so attractive about her that she instantly makes you feel warm. There's droves of people who show up for parades anytime that she's in the spotlight. You almost feel like you've got a personal connection with her, but there's this almost disjointed level, or I guess disconnected level of cautiousness that comes with it. She has every single outfit hemmed and weighted in the hemline so that it stays down. She carries a specific weight in her purse so that it's always the exact same. And I think that sort of cautiousness, that awareness of potential obstacles or potential pitfalls, when it's partnered with woo, can just look like, wow, I'm magnetically attracted to that cautiousness. It's the difference, I think. Woo might say it'll be okay, and deliberative plus woo, I think, would say let's make sure it's okay. So let's really find some truth behind the way that I win you over.
So this is becoming quickly this part. It's becoming my favorite part of Theme Thursdays. We work through kind of just some reflections and observations for individuals who have high deliberative.
Yeah. So if you've got high deliberative, I think, first of all, it's going to be really important to take great care in the trusted advisors that you think with. You're going to take great care in it because making a relationship is something you can execute on, and therefore you're going to be very cautious in the way that you connect with other humans. But if you could purposefully take great care and do some due diligence around who can be your best thinking partners, I think that's going to be a fantastic one. Understand that slow does not equal bad, and help sell the value of deceleration. So think about opportunities or examples when you have slowed things down and we've been better off for it. Again, deliberative likes to engage with proof and with the truth. And so if you can expand that deliberative back to, okay, what has worked in the past? And that also might help you introduce your thoughtfulness. So I like to say this with several themes. How do you introduce your themes before they introduce you? Help people understand, what do they get when they work with you? Well, they get a level of thoughtfulness and of consideration maybe that they're not used to getting. And so that probably means that you're going to ask a lot of questions up front. It doesn't mean that you're being critical. It just means that you care that much about where we're moving things, that you want to make sure that you are able to really be there with the process and engage with it. So think about introducing that up front. I think communicate the conservative aims for action. Think about what's the benefit of being conservative? When I've been in lots of organizations, and some of them like to say, we know that we're incredibly fiscally conservative, and they'll say that up front, and they like to help their employees know that, and they'll say, okay, we're not going to jump in and spend a whole lot of money on a new initiative. And if you can say that up front and let people know that you're going to take great care and weigh all of the deliberative isn't about weighing all the pros and cons. It's more about weighing all the cons against moving forward. But we're going to weigh all of those before we make a decision. I think about reviewing and identifying your best processes. Think about, where is restraint the most important? So within your entire life, where can we best use your deliberative so that you can free yourself up to really focus on a few decisions, a few actions, rather than having to reserve restraint for every single action. And I think really there is this probably misunderstanding of deliberative. I think sometimes it's just that they're always slowing down all the time, and sometimes I think it gets confused with strategic, because all we see sometimes is that they need time to think. We fail to see that they also move things forward. I think what deliberative desires is consideration, but it's consideration so that we can progress. So once something's decided, it can look very fast. Once somebody with deliberative has gone through that thoughtfulness process, they can move on really quickly because they're probably desiring the next thing that they have to think about.
Monica, let me guess. 95 in chat says deliberative is number one. Sometimes I feel like I'll just read it from the first person. Sometimes I feel like I overdo it with every aspect of my life, and although I enjoy it, I feel like most people don't get me. It's a little lonely. Can you talk a little bit to that as we think about that from a personal perspective? And I would get why we hear this. I think sometimes when we think about deliberative, how would you respond to that?
It can be a little lonely. Plenty of people don't think as much as people with high deliberative think. Plenty of people are okay with things going wrong compared to, people with deliberative. So I think if you can probably tackle the loneliness if you can invite people into what you're doing. And that comes from carefully thinking about how can you script and explain the value of your process. And that might be, I'd encourage you to think about what's the last thing that you accomplished in a deliberative way, and how did that benefit other people? So how can you think about, where can my deliberative play with others? And maybe it is saying, hey, there's a big decision that needs to be made. Bring me in on it. Offer up your thoughtfulness there. I also think, where can you aim it? You don't. Just like my communication doesn't have to say everything in order to be effective, deliberative doesn't have to slow down everything in order to be effective. Think about what kind of processes do you already know the right answer to that you can repeat? What kind of ways can you say up front, I'm going to need to think more about X, but I'm going to let you run on Y? And maybe even that, maybe the way that you take on your responsibilities is a mini exercise in deliberative by saying, okay, there's greater risk if I let go or I delegate some of these things, and I'm going to keep the things with the greater risk. And I think that's a way that you can help people see that you're demonstrating your cautiousness in a way that is more about compassion rather than just frustration.
Yeah, and I know for me, with activator and ideation, very, very close. And it seems like I want to move fast, but I really value that deliberative approach. And I need that partner I love running those ideas by them, especially when I'm not in a hurry. And that
Right.
does happen from time to time when I'm planning. And get that thoughtful feedback. I had a friend in college who very, very high. It had to be number one. And I would often run things by him, and I needed to learn to just wait for some of that to come back, because he would think through it. And when I'd already moved on, he would come back a day or two later and say, hey, I thought through this stuff. And I learned to wait for him. And just be like, no, if I don't need to make these decisions today, these are things that are important, and I can let him think through it. And that was super valuable for me, and I had to learn. So in that partnership, when we think about deliberative, find those folks, and it won't be perfect when you start, right? You've got to work, like anything, you've got to work into these relationships. But I found them as the activator ideation. I found it very valuable. So like you said, offer that service, right?
I have a great partner at work who, in fact, one of my favorite people to work with at work has deliberative very high, and I have learned that he'll help me get to greater awareness about what I need to do if I tell him up front what my questions are going to be. So not just, hey, can we get together on the phone? I want to bounce some ideas off of you, but I will send a quick email and an invite saying, here's the ideas I want to bounce off of you. And then I'll give him some time in between that idea and the actual meeting. And once we get there, I'll just say, hey, what have you thought through? I think it takes a lot of maturity for deliberative to separate the thought process and the strategy from the action, because it is an executing theme, and deliberative likes to know, what do we have to do, what can we move forward. So if you're going to loan your deliberative to somebody, I think you need to probably set parameters that are very clear on the front end of who's going to own the action after this.
Yeah. Any other final thoughts before we jump into the theme dynamics?
And my last thought is a quote from Benjamin Franklin. It's, distrust and caution are the parents of security. So it's, again, seeing there's value, there's beauty, there's care and love in not necessarily taking everything at face value, but really being aware of what could be some of the things that could go wrong.
Yeah, and bumping up against immature or raw, when we think about this high activation or this high, right, with those that move faster, can be difficult. It's just going to happen. You're going to run up against, if you're high and deliberate, you're going to run up against those people, and you have to have a little bit of grace, I think, sometimes in that, to kind of realize, hey, it's not personal. They're acting within where they're at. And so extending that grace to us who have that high activation and want to move all the time, I think is super important. Well, we have, and Mike, I have you do this every week because it gives me a few seconds to spin this up. Let's talk a little bit about theme dynamics, what they are, and how they came to be.
So the idea of theme dynamics is realizing that humans are more interesting than a couple words on a page, but that nobody is any one theme, but our combination of themes really make a beautiful pattern and a beautiful blend of how those themes really play out together. So theme dynamics is how do you think about how one theme informs another theme, one theme plays off of another theme, maybe even how themes that you have both of help to temper each other or highlight each other. So what we're going to look at here is an app that's available through the Expanding Your Strengths ebook, which you can find on Amazon. And when you purchase that ebook, you get access to this app. And the app helps you do a quick little drop down that Jim's going to demonstrate here on his screen to really think about what might two themes at a time sound like together. When you're preparing to coach people, I think it's important to take into consideration what combination, what blend of themes do they have, not just what are they one by one. This really accelerates your ability to understand the person as a coach, but it's always, I think, great. This is fun for us, and it's fun for our brains. Anytime you think about that piece around theme dynamics, you also want to make sure that you include the person you're coaching and say, okay, how do these two play out for you?
Yeah, as of this recording, I will say US, Canada, and the UK for the book. We have international coming soon, so hang tight, guys. I know I've been saying that for a while. We do have international options coming soon if you're outside of those Amazon markets. That's why we show it to you here, so you get some idea of what's available. Let's talk about deliberative and activator.
Sure, and these next ones that we're going to compare with deliberative or dynamize with deliberative come from our Facebook group. So you voted on which ones you wanted to hear blended with deliberative to think, okay, if somebody had both of these in their top 5, what would it sound like? We've already talked about responsibility and woo. Now we're going to look at deliberative plus activator. Activator is an influencing theme. It's about let's get going. When you pair that with the deliberative executing theme, it sounds like this. You understand and believe equally that haste makes waste, and that the early bird gets the worm. When I thought about these two together, the phrase that came to mind was, let's start thinking. Let's begin the deliberative process. I think if you were to boil it down to 2 words, deliberative plus activator might be an eager assessor.
Yeah, I love that and statement in there, right? Haste makes waste, and 2 opposite statements. Very powerful. I'm a little jealous of this combination together.
There's power in that and.
I know, there certainly is. Let's look at deliberative and strategic.
Sure. You know what? I oftentimes contrast these when I'm teaching them. And when I do that, I talk about strategic is like looking at Google Maps from the entire map view. You know, when you type in directions on Google, you can choose, okay, show me the overview. I think that's strategic. So you can usually choose from like 3 different routes and click on the route that you want that you think is going to be the quickest. Strategic's about looking for what's the fastest way forward by picking up on patterns. Deliberative is if you choose on Google Maps to look at the street view rather than the map view. So instead of being at 40,000 feet, you're going to go through each possible route from the view of the street. So I think about it as getting down, as Joey from Friends would say, I got to get into the map. Really putting your mind into what is there, and what you're looking for is there anything specifically wrong that could lead to danger on any of these points along the map that seeing the whole view doesn't tell us. And when you look at both of these together, it sounds like this. As you move toward a destination, you consider every possible route and anticipate every possible obstacle. That's not an opposite. So it's again the power of and. I think it's about finding the most accurate plan, and it's about also having a backup. So strategic, I think, loves the plot, and deliberative loves the product.
No. It's a great way. It's super powerful. How about deliberative and adaptability?
Yeah, you guys are doing a really good job of trying to pick the most seemingly contrasting themes. I'm proud of our group here. When I think about deliberative plus adaptability lives in our relationship building domain. It really is about giving people what they need in the moment that they need it, a relationship with the present and with the now. When you add that to deliberative, I think about it as just being careful consideration of what are people's present challenges, really not wanting to think about just abstract things that need to be done, but what's going to affect what we're facing immediately, some urgency around what you execute on. I think it's being responsive with your analysis. If you look at our app here, it says it's your vigilance protects you from some of life's storms. When one comes unannounced, you bend, but you don't break.
That's powerful. I love that. You bend, but you don't break. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Deliberative and input.
Deliberative and input. Think about how well informed the deliberative process would be if you had input. So input's a strategic thinking theme, just like strategic, and it's about gathering as much information as you possibly can and collecting information and sort of archiving. And once something is known or understood by somebody with input, it stays there. When you put these together, my thoughts around this is it's a relationship with data that informs danger. Also, it's not just about possibility, but it's about credibility. So it's not just about what could happen, but perhaps what has happened in the past, or what does the credible, maybe almost academic world tell us we should be aware of. If you look at our app, it says you gather effective tools and valuable resources that can help manage risk and prevent problems.
Yeah, so someone who'd work in the United States in FEMA, might, right? When you think about the
Sure.
collecting these resources, and
Yep.
when emergencies happen, they're able to deploy all of those pieces
Yeah.
available for it. So very good. And then next week we're talking about developer, and so let's compare those, or let's put those two in the hopper.
Yeah, so again, I think it's how awesome would you feel if you had a mentor who cared about you in as cautious of a way as we've talked about deliberative being? That's what developer and deliberative look like. So our app says here, before you invest in developing a person's potential, you carefully consider the potential risks and obstacles that could occur. Developer's a relationship building theme, and it's about helping people improve. It doesn't discriminate against only helping a certain kind of people, or only helping people who can get the most out of it. It's about how do I take everybody that I have a relationship with to the next level of development that they can reach. And so I think when you put those together, there's great care in how deliberative selects their circle of friends. So it's having somebody who's incredibly invested in you getting better.
I just realized I took that down. And did you read it?
I did. Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, good.
The rest of it came from my genius brain.
That's awesome. I'm arranging at the moment, and we just dropped the link if you want to join us. If you have Deliberative High, we'd ask you to join us. I've been trying to get that link out a little bit earlier in the program so you guys can adapt. You'll need a webcam and a microphone, or they could be built in, one and the same. We'd love to have you jump in and join us. So we talk a little bit about your deliberative. This would be great to get some personal feedback from you. Kind of what's the best of it? I think that's kind of, Micah, what we're asking for is how are you deploying it, how are you using it, and how is it changing your performance and some of the things that you're doing, or what is the best of it from you on that. So if you want to take a second and try and dial in as we look ahead, Micah, as we're just waiting for somebody to join us, when we think about developer coming forward to can you contrast as we think about deliberative and then developer? Those, one seems very inward focused on what I do, the other seems very outward focused on what I'm doing in others. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Maybe that could be summarized just by the domains that they live in. Deliberative is about what am I executing, and being very careful about the way that I'm executing it. Developer is about who am I helping. So I think that developer is, by its very nature, a lot more people-focused, whereas deliberative is task-focused. I think that they could both be external pieces because they're about having a relationship with something, outside yourself. Neither of them are about sort of closing in and thinking. They're about moving things forward. And deliberative is moving the task forward or the project forward. Developer is about moving the individual forward and helping them to grow. I think they're both about that. If you put them both on a timeline, they'd both be facing the future and anticipating what is coming down the pipe next.
Micah, I know you've got are you teaching here at 2 o'clock?
I'm coaching.
You're coaching at 2 o'clock,
Yeah.
So I think we'll wrap it with that. Any final thoughts as we head out?
Just thanks. I think that deliberative, I hope we fell a little bit more in love with it today. I think it's a beautiful theme, even though it is my 34. Anytime that we get to hear a little bit more about the benefit of it, the motivation behind it, the power of it, we get to see the beauty of it. So thanks.
Yeah. Micah, I'll let you jump since you need to go and we're right up against the hour. I'll let
Thanks,
you
everyone.
go. Thanks for coming in. And with that, I'll remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we have at the available at the Gallup Strength Center, just gallupstrengthcenter.com. Send us your questions, comments. And if you'd like to be a guest blogger, we take some of that as well. You'll kind of a little interviewing process to get that done. Send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. Put guest a blogger in the subject line so we know what we're doing. And then Micah actually runs the blog, and we'll get back to you. We're not able to take them all, but we do take many. And if you're interested in doing that, we'd love to hear from you. Don't forget, at the coach's blog, coaching.gallup.com, you can get access to all the resources we have available through the Facebook group, YouTube page, our iTunes and RSS feeds. We say these links all the time, but it's hard when you're listening to the program to know where they're at. And I reference this a lot when I get questions. Everything, I try to make everything available at the coach's blog. So coaching.gallup.com, that should be bookmarked for you. It's got the companion guides. It's got everything is out there. If you ever check there first, if you can't find it, then let me know. Most of the time I'll find it for you and get it back to you. If you're interested in being a Gallup certified coach, you can see a complete list of all our courses, including and actually tomorrow, some more Strength Summit information is coming out. Hopefully you'll join us July 18th, 19th, and 20th here in Omaha, Nebraska. And if you'd like to come out for the global Clifton Strengths Summit, we have some information. Really, everything around our courses and becoming certified is at our new courses site. It's just courses.gallup.com. We try not to make it too difficult for you to remember those things. Again, courses.gallup.com to do that. If you're interested in discovering, JB mentioned this, if you're interested in discovering all 34 of your talent themes, an upgrade to your top 5 is available on the Gallup Strength Center. Just click on all 34, I think is what we call it. If you want to get that, you can get it from the gallupstrengthcenter.com. It's available to you. Pricing and information is out there and available. If you found this webcast helpful, we'd ask that you share it. And we want to make sure we say thanks for everyone who came out and joined us live. I think of the chat room here. That's really the best way to join us, is to join us live. I know many of you, maybe 20 times more than we get in the live show, listen to us on the recorded version. But we're out here every Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern. Did I get that right? Yeah, no, I'm sorry. It's noon Eastern for Theme Thursday. 11 o'clock Central, we are live in this time zone, and we'd love to have you come out. I want to say thanks to everyone in the chat room. And with that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.